Welcome, everyone. This is episode 22 of the Brandon Adams podcast. I have with me my good friend, Nelson Pena. Nelson, how are you?
I'm good, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me. And, I'm excited to talk to you and dig deep into what we talk about often.
So my podcast, I don't know how closely you followed it, but it's a little bit unique in that I'm all over the map. I do a little bit of fantasy sports. My last podcast was on poker. I do a lot of economics and finance. It's pretty much what I'm interested in and the guest that I feel like I'll be most engaged with that week. Like a lot of people post-COVID, gained a few pounds and was a bit lazy and then decided to fire it up and get in shape. And you and I, we've aged together. We've known each other since 2007. We've had ups and downs, life, fitness. And I would say both of us are in good shape, you far more than me. But we both pride ourselves in fitness and health. And there are unique challenges associated with being in your 40s. I suppose that everyone has to fight their own ego when it comes to aging and health, because I like to use the example of tennis. I often go to tennis tournaments and compete in, say, 30 and over, 35 and over, 40 and over division. And if you're 40 and you watch 50-year-olds compete, you see they're slow, they don't react very well, they seem to struggle with their fitness, they're not explosive, but you can't imagine that happening to yourself, and yet it does. So now you are the person that I know who's in by far the best shape of any 40-something. You are actively coaching others. You have, for me, like an unbelievable constitution to weather the ups and downs in life, both physically and emotionally. And I love to see that the main focus now is coaching. I want to start with the physical aspects of things. What is a difference for guys in their 40s who are training? And maybe give us some background in what you do to stay in shape. And I could give some anecdotal examples, but maybe you could go into it.
Again, thanks for that intro. And right, there's so much to unpack there, but to keep this focused, I'll follow your lead and stick with the physical, right? In the 40s. I need to sprinkle in there, I'm in my early 40s, almost mid 40s now. And yes, I'm in the best shape of my life. And thank you for saying that. But, I'm not a physical trainer. I'm not a professional athlete. Right. So I need to say that I'm let's say the average common man in the US, especially in New York City, where I say that because I have a full-time job, right? I have 2 kids. And right, so there's not much wiggle room in terms of timing on trying to be in the best shape of my life. That being said, on the physical side, I make things non-negotiable. My physical health, my wellness, and obviously my mental health is I would say my number one, 1B priority. Obviously like my kids and family are 1A, but I make my health and fitness non-negotiable, and it's a top priority. So that's first and foremost, right? So you have to lead with that. If you're in your 40s, you have to make that a focus, right? And you have to get buy-in from your family, from your friends who are going to support you and be like, oh yeah, that's Nelson. That's who Nelson is. Nelson is, he's all about looking good, feeling good, being his best self. And right, and that's my physical approach, is looking good, feeling good, and being your best self, plus making things non-negotiable, right? And that's the bottom line.
I've found it interesting as a brief digression that if you look, say, on Instagram or on YouTube, popular coaches, they tend to be really hardcore. Like the David Goggins type model is a popular model, and personally, I find that motivating. I don't know why. Maybe it's the same reason people enjoy watching like the Rocky IV training sequence or something. Like the hardcore is appealing, but you have an element of the Goggins of the hardcore. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely, right. And just because we're wired that way, right? Every one of us has that let's say intensity in some form of their life, be it physical, be it in their job, be it in poker tournaments, be it in performance. And right, so that's what I do. Like, that's just who I am. So one of my, let's say, vessels to unleash that intensity is in my workouts, right? On Instagram, trust me, you'll probably see like 20% of, me being down on my knees, sweating, almost throwing up, because I just don't have a camera crew with me. But, I push myself to that intensity because honestly, that's the feeling I'm chasing, right? And that's what motivates me and motivates, the people I work with is, it's not about a goal, right? The goal is to chase a feeling, right? So that feeling is going to help us, is going to move us, especially in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s. It's that feeling, right? It's like, what do you want to feel every single day? It's almost that like runner's high, but times a million, right? For me, it's like this, it's like a religious experience, going for a 3-mile run or a 5-mile bike, or even, just an intense workout. It's that feeling I'm chasing. And so in order for me to get to that feeling, you better believe I'm going to bring 199% to that because I want that feeling.
So that Goggins intensity, you think that everyone has that streak to some extent and you just have to tap into it?
Yeah. And, tap into it, but that takes time, right? The tapping into is almost like, right, the example of peeling back an onion. A lot of us don't do the work of like, all right, why do I want to feel that? Like it's a lot deeper than that, right? So you have to ask yourself that question of like, why am I doing this? What am I feeling? What am I chasing? So yeah, absolutely. All of us have that Goggin intensity. David Goggin has spent a lot of time working on himself. He's gone through so many Navy SEAL things and ultra marathons where my point is, if you have that much time by yourself, you better believe you're going to peel back your onion to the core. So he knows clearly what he wants to feel every time he works out, right? So he brings that intensity. So my message is, all of us have that. I think a lot of us just haven't spent the time to peel back that onion and get to the core of unleashing that intensity.
So a lot of your methods as a coach, they come down to tapping into virtuous cycles where, to simplify, you can explain it in more detail, but to simplify, you work out, you feel better, you get better at working out, and you launch onto a new positive path. Similar, like for me in 2007, 8, I was playing a lot of poker and I thought I was going to the gym every once in a while, but I was not in shape. And then sort of rediscovered tennis. And the first time you go out, you can't survive the hour, right? And then like you get better and now you're going an hour and a half. Now you're burning more calories, more intensity, and it gets easier and easier. And it's a virtuous cycle. And all form of workouts, they have elements of that. So explain explain your motivation cycles and the kind of virtuous cycles that you like to launch people on.
Yeah, it goes back to that feeling, right? It's step one is identifying that feeling. Step two is how do you get to that feeling, right? Is it playing 3 out of 5 sets when it's 95 degrees in South Miami, right? Is it, is it tapping into that sort of like spiritual place of motivating you why you work out? But, it just goes down to, like you said, it's creating that. For me, the goal sometimes isn't physical or spiritual. The goal is to get into what you said, that momentum, right? I like to call it like success momentum, right? So once you get the momentum going, right, it's like a train, you become a locomotive. And once you get those wheels going, that performance going, you hitting that forehand in the sweet spot every time, you hitting that first serve, 70% of the times in, you're going to want to chase that feeling over and over and over again, almost every day, every other day. And that creates this sort of like momentum, or people call it, I have heard flow. For me, it's all about momentum, right? Because I want to do it the next day, the next day, the next day. And same thing with like performing in poker tournaments, right? It's not, you create that, like if you're able to really tap into that feeling and every single time you perform, reach that feeling, right? You got to reach that feeling. If you don't reach that feeling, then you might as well just delete that tournament or delete that time you played tennis. But if you reach that feeling when you're playing that poker tournament, you're like, all right, check. That's gonna sink into your system, right? Subconsciously, consciously, physically, mentally, that the next day or the next time you're at that table, that tennis court, you're gonna see yourself moving towards that again unconsciously because you're trying to tap into that feeling. So for me, it's like, how do we create that success momentum?
On the mental side, you mentioned that you're squeezing the physical part between family time, between jobs, and you've got impressive like mental resiliency, positivity. What do you do to engender that? Do you think that, and as a coach, what do you do for people where like mindset is a key focus? Do you get the physical right first, or do you directly engage mindset?
Yeah, look, it starts from the top down, right? Top meaning that the head, right? The mental, moving down to your heart, the spiritual. And for me, the last is a sort of physical. But, let me take a step back just because, you said like, how do I endure all this, right? And I think that's life, right? We're in our early 40s and life happens. And life will give us all these things to either stand up to, step up to, or fall on your knees and go down a different path. But again, we're not wired that way, right? A lot of people have this limited belief. A lot of people are capable of so much more that they don't even know, right? And so for me, it's like, it starts in your early 20s and your 30s. We come out of the gates, we went to the best business schools, the best law schools, et cetera. Our hopes are so high. Our scenarios are super rosy, and then your 30s, it's almost like a leaky roof. You start realizing there could only be one CEO in the world, and that's not going to be you. Some marriages crumble, and, maybe yours crumbles as well. That dream of owning a NFL team, becomes impossible because you can't even cover your mortgage, right? So we kind of stay within this like emotional basement for a long time, and we adjust our aspirations, our expectations, and we become sort of average. We stay in that middle. So the point is, in our youth, our expectations are super high, and as we get older, they get super low, right? So what I do is like, we got to delete that. We got to delete that from our brains and come up with like, all right, man, you're 45 years old. Like, we still have a lot of life in us. in us. We still have a lot of potential. What experiences do we want to create, right? Life is not over, right? But, it really is, to answer your question, it's from the top down, right? So we have to, it's like mentally, spiritually, and then the physical aspect to me is last.
On the physical side, I would like to dive in to that, because you have a bit of a specialty in coaching people in the 40s, because that's where you are. It's a unique time frame. It's not a focus of many trainers and coaches. So I would like to get into that. I'll share my experiences, like 30s versus 40s, and you could say what it's like for you. The big differences are just noticeable differences in explosion, like energy in workouts, and then the need for, well, I'll say if you get out of shape, to get back in shape in the early 30s is no real thing. It's like a few weeks or a couple of months. If you have reversals in the early 40s, it's quite hard to overcome. And one like big difference that I noticed post COVID is like a lot of people gained a quick 5 pounds during the COVID lockdown, during that initial lockdown, and then sort of successfully cut it off end a bit. And if you do that sort of cut phase, which every athlete from a triathlete to a bodybuilder, anyone who's trying to get in shape has those sort of bulking and cutting phases, or eating and then cutting phases. And in the early 40s, when you try to do any sort of cut phase, that's when you realize the limitations of age. Like it tends to, when you're in your early 30s, it works the way it's supposed to. You cut a lot of fat and not much muscle. And then when you're in your early 40s, you end up cutting a lot of muscle and not as much fat. And that's just the way it goes.
I disagree. I think, if that's happening, you have, you just don't have the right plan, number one. And number two, you're not executing, or the person's not executing. I got, the most ripped I've ever been at the, post my surgery of my shoulder, at the age of 42, the most ripped I've ever been. Right. And so, again, like physical and performance are completely different things. So, right, yes, I was a triathlete, and performance wise, I was super quick running, biking, swimming. But physically, I look kind of average, right? I mean, not average, I look normal.
To set the baselines for people, you played collegiate tennis, you've run 15 or so Olympic distance triathlons, but then you're also kind of a freak in that well, I recall when we were out 10 years ago and you had the push-up contest in the bar after drinking, and you knocked.
I was not, someone challenged me to do that.
But you weren't working out so much at that time, right?
No, I was average.
And you did like 100.
Yeah.
So your starting point is a good starting point.
Correct. In terms of performance, right? If your goal is in your 40s to have that like muscle cut ripped, that's a different beast and a different training, right? And that's why I think, I disagreed with you where, yes, in your 40s, you can have that muscle density and that ripped, but it takes the right plan, consistency, right? When I got the most ripped, believe it or not, I went on 6 months of eating the same thing at the same time with zero deviation. Right? I made that non-negotiable because my goal was to get to see, right? I was given this green light by my doctor after I got recovered from my surgery on my shoulder. And I told myself, Brandon, I said, you know what? This is a gift that my body's healthy again. I'm going to honor my body like never before. And I'm going to get the most ripped I've ever been. Not the quickest on the treadmill, not the quickest on the bike. I want to get the most ripped, right? So I went on 6 months of zero deviation of what I ate, how I ate, when I ate, and my workouts. And I look like an Adonis.
So 6 months.
Zero deviation. I'll tell you even a funny story.
What's the alcohol, caffeine, zero?
Oh, yeah, zero. I mean, things are non-negotiable. And that's why you have to have buy-in from your friends, from your support staff, where I told my friends, I'm like, my goal is in 6 months to be the most ripped I've ever been. So, even we went out to like family dinners, I would bring my Tupperware and eat my meals. Like, I would walk around with a bag in New York City with my Tupperware of meals. Sadly, at one point, I got so obsessed where I had to make a trip to Los Angeles, right? From New York City to LA is roughly 6 hours. The other thing, I was not eating out at all. All my meals were, I cooked myself, I packed myself, where I flew to LA, Brandon, and I packed a week's worth of my food that I cooked here. Where honestly, I think it went a little bad, but I still ate it because I'm like, there's zero deviation. I got to stay on this plan. So to sum it all up, man, in your 40s, in your 30s, you could get it in the most ripped by having the right plan, consistency, and zero deviation. It's non-negotiable, man. It was non-negotiable.
I think that illustrates the broader point where when you're in your 40s, the discipline required is so much greater relative to achieving the same results in the 30s. So my goals are, I've never had the goal to get ripped. That's just never been a goal of mine. It's always more performance oriented, like a mile time or a 3 mile time or a tennis goal or something like that. And one thing that becomes interesting about the 40s is that you're actually doing very well to maintain, which is kind of tough on human psychology because we like the feeling of improving. But if you're a very good tennis player and you're 41, I mean, for you to be the same level of tennis player at 50 is actually quite an accomplishment. Or if you have a good 3 mile time at 41, it's pretty hard to do the same thing at 50. And that it's very tough on human psychology, but I think that sort of is fitness in the 40s.
Yeah, I agree, right? I definitely agree with what you said earlier, where your explosion in your 40s, at least in running, right, in the tennis court, definitely slows down. We lose steps, right? That's just a fact. So that's something that in our 40s and our egos, we just got to accept, and it is what it is, right? I will tell you this, where I find it interesting, triathletes actually improve as they age, right? And I found specifically my swim times and my bike times actually either on par or improve, right? Yes, my running isn't as fast, but my swimming and my cycling is either on par or a little bit better. You have to slow down. And that's one thing is in our 40s and our 50s, you have to really listen to your body to prevent injury, right? Because we can't go out there and play tennis for 2 hours every single day. You will tear something.
Yeah, that's where Goggins, as I find him very motivating, but he might be destructive in that regard. He encourages people to push possibly too hard.
There's other ways to push, right?
So with regard to your zero deviation program, and I think you're not alone in this regard. Now, this is the most extreme example I've ever heard. Someone having same time every day, same things, no alcohol, no caffeine, flies their food around, takes it to work. This is the most extreme example I've ever heard. However, among all my friend set, I do find that almost everyone who's fit operates in regimes of discipline and regimes of non-discipline. And the regimes of discipline, they're not as extreme as what you're doing, but there's something uncomfortable about it. There's something where they're counting calories or doing something that is a daily discipline, and they're holding it for a bit. We can go into mine and why mine might not be successful, why I might lose too much muscle, but on yours, what was the science behind your program, or was it just you knew that was a discipline that you could keep? What did you know exactly what your calorie burn was likely to be each day?
No, I definitely didn't keep track of calories at all, right? Mine was more sort of like macros, right? How much protein, how much fat, how much carbs I was eating. And it's really just consistency, right? It's that consistency and that belief that the plan you're on, what you're doing works, right? So I don't need to count calories. I didn't have to weigh myself, because for me, that was like a mental, it didn't make me feel good to weigh myself. It didn't make me feel good to count the calories. What made me feel good what gave me comfort was knowing that what I was eating was feeding, at that point, my goal of building muscle and getting ripped.
Explain the advantages and disadvantages of having, say you have 6 months dedicated, right? And imagine two different programs, one where you have like a cutting and bulking phase or phases, however you want to structure them, and another where you do what you did, which is a relatively constant program of exercise and calorie intake, macro intake. What do you see as the advantages and disadvantages of those two approaches?
Look, I think you have to be clear, right? You can't, again, I'm not a bodybuilder, but worked for me is you can't bulk and cut at the same time. So you have to decide, okay, during this period, I'm going to, is it bulk or cut? Right. And so that's number one.
But when you're doing constant throughout, isn't that sort of like bulking and cutting at the same time?
No, because what my goal at the time was I was trying to get the most ripped as possible. So I was trying to get cut.
So it's 6 months of cutting is basically.
I mean, I basically got in 3 months, like my baseline was always like, I was always active. Right. So within 3 months, I got the definition, the muscle mass I want. Here's the thing, right? There's no secret, right? There's a lot of stuff out there where if you lower your body fat, your muscles are going to pop, right? So you don't need big muscles. You just got to lower that body fat. So that's the trick, is like, how do we at this age lower our body fat? Look, you could go on the internet and get the plan. It's not about the plan. It's honestly having someone checking in on you, having an accountability partner being like, Brandon, all right, every Wednesday we're going to check in. What's going on? And it's at zero deviation. So for me, like you said, I'm just a freak where every week, I would check in with myself. And that's why I know for a fact there was zero deviation of meals for 6 months, because I checked in, I wrote it down. And for me, it was almost like this weekly obsession or goal that I wanted to see. All right, 1 week, I'm going to go eating the same stuff, having the same workouts. That 1 week turned into a month. I'm like, all right, well, that's 1 month. I could do another month. I did 2 months. So for me, that was the obsession.
Now, did you, in that sort of extended cutting phase, did you have issues with hunger and irritability at any points, or?
No, I wasn't on the edge, because I left everything either like on my workout. So yeah, there were points where I was hungry, but keep in mind the other thing is there's so many assumptions of like cutting of like that I learned, right? Me personally, and that works for my body where, I was eating 7 meals a day. My last meal for many of those months was around 11 p.m. was 8 ounces of red meat and vegetables. Like my house at midnight would smell like steak. So that was, again, there's so much to unpack there that I personally learned of like, well, how do you get cut? It's not about eating salad and not eating. I was eating every 2 to 3 hours. I had Tupperware with me and I was eating. My last meal was at 11, right? So it's
that last meal at 11. Was that just something you learned that you like to sleep on a full stomach, or you like to?
I learned that I needed red meat for my muscles to. I felt and I know it was like that red meat made my muscles denser. Right? Again, I was obsessed. I was obsessed with my physique. And I keep saying that because there's differences, right? Performance, and we're just talking about physique. I was upset, like that red meat added density to my muscles, my chest, my abs, where when I woke up, I noticed it. And that's why sometimes those like bodybuilders are chasing that feeling of like that pump, because they're so not even in tune mentally. They're so much on this plan that they're able to see if you eat, half a cup of rice, you're able to notice that difference in your performance. You're able to notice that difference in your physique, right? And so that takes, right, this consistency compounds. And that's why it's like once that momentum starts going, there was no one that was going to get me off my momentum track a week in, a month out, 2 months. Look, I flew food out to LA. Like, I brought Tupperware with me to restaurants. People were like, you're crazy. I remember I went to a holiday party in Christmas time at, this place, and everyone ordered their food. Once the food came, I whipped out my Tupperware. And I asked the waiter for a plate. I put the food on a plate. But again, that's the only way that.
Well, if your goals are that extreme, then any little thing is ready. Well, I know, but any little thing is ready to throw you for a reversal. Like I've noticed, post-COVID, a lot of people have had fitness programs, and sometimes they're easier to stick with because you don't have the random night out with your buddies where you have a bottle of wine and like a lot of rich food, and unfortunately, sometimes those dinners throw you off for a week, or they throw you off the plan entirely. And so sometimes you do have to get a little bit extreme, like bringing the meals to the.
Yeah, or like, I hate using the word extreme, right? For me, it's non-negotiable. It's like, that's who he is. It's like, that's who Brandon is. He plays tennis, he plays poker. That's a fact, right? So it's not extreme. It's just, that's who you are. And if people can't, that's who I am. Like, I run, swim, bike, take care of my family, and take care of myself. That's a fact, right? So like, yeah, maybe there's periods where I'm being a little bit more strict and I'm focused in. It's not extreme. That's who I am. Sorry. And again, like we know this, right? In order for you to be the best at anything, you have to make things non-negotiable, and you have to commit to them. Period. You know that.
How do you tolerate like small failures? How did your own mind tolerate your own small failures?
Give me an example.
For instance, in my cutting phase, or when I'm trying to get in shape for something, like whatever, a few years ago I did a mile bet. Sometimes I do like a tennis challenge or something. If I'm trying to get in shape, I love to go out to eat. I love to eat and drink. Like I'll just love to go out to dinners. And so it's actually quite remarkable that having consumed all of the things that I've consumed over a lifetime, that I'm in the shape that I'm in, because it's a lot of eating. And so for me, to do a cutting phase, I get sort of short-term scientific about it. I know my exact calorie burn. which I'm surprised you don't when you're doing these phases. So I've done like the resting metabolic rate test and then the VO2 max where you can see your burn for each level of heart rate. So I can estimate very well my burn on a day. So if my goal is to lose 10 pounds, I'll just have like a 6-week period where I'm just trying to lose 35,000 calories and I'll just have calories in, calories out and do it that way. I mean, it's boring, but that's the only thing that works for me. Otherwise, I just like eating and drinking too much. I'll just do that if I don't have the goal. You know what I mean? But for me, what a short-term reversal would be like is, let's say you and I have some running challenge in like a month, and I know that the quickest way for me to meet my goal is to basically shed 10 pounds. So I'm trying to lose like 35,000 calories in that time. What an ideal process would look like is you're losing 1,100 calories a day. You're exercising. You're not having days where you lose 3,000 calories and other days where you're like excess 1,000 calories. That's what a good process would look like. What a bad process would look like is excess and then overdo the correction. And so a period of weakness would be you go out with your buddies and you have the bottle of wine and the big rich dinner and you have 7,000, 6,000 calories on the day. So how do you just not have those days of weakness ever, or how do you tolerate those weaknesses?
It goes back into making it non-negotiable, right? It's like using your example, like you're in this phase, you got 1 month to make things non-negotiable. You're stronger than that, right? You could go 30 days of making non-negotiable. That's number one. Number two is have buy-in. You need that support staff, your friends, knowing like, hey, Brandon has a race in 25 days. Yeah, we could go out to dinner, but he's not gonna drink. Maybe he's not gonna have dessert. So you need that support staff, right? You need that accountability, right? Some people do have an accountability partner, which is a coach. Some people, have accountability partners, which are friends. But it's number one, making it non-negotiable, and number two is having that support, that accountability. So yeah, if my goal is in 30 days to run, to lose weight, like I could go 30 days not doing it. It's not a big deal. But then you say, hey, what if it's like your best friend's birthday and everyone's going to Vegas? Then honestly, look, you got to live, right? And then so you do the race maybe the following month, right? There's also life. Trust me, I'm not all about, I'm a big believer in you have to live, right? So I try not to hit pause on life. As you know, I hit play in life. But again, I commit to things. I commit to life. I commit to this beautiful life.
So as a coach, when your student misbehaves, has a bad day, or has a bad week, what is your approach? What are you telling him? Let's say your student is trying to lose 20 pounds and has some challenge for himself, running a 10K or something like that. He has a bad week. What do you tell him?
Look, it depends, right? Before I start working with anyone, I have a strategy session with them. And one of my questions is basically, how committed are you to whatever whatever goal you have is? And number two is, on a level of 1 to 10, how do you want me to coach you? Is it a 5? Is it a 10? Is it a 9? Is it a 1? So based on that, then, I take, it depends. So that's going to make this answer a little bit different. So if I would ask you, how committed are you to running, a mile under, I don't know, let's say a 5K, right? 3 miles under 18 minutes, right? I would ask you, how committed are you to that? You would say, very committed. I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how should I coach you? What level of, let's say, intensity?
So that would be like with Goggins, he's got some great stories where he likes to push people to do a 10, and then earlier in his career he would go live with them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If it were 10, right? Because 10 would be the most extreme accountability and
and so I've had people where they've say 10, or we literally go to their house. I teach them what to buy in terms of nutrition. I teach them how to cook it. We even go online and buy the Tupperware. I buy a bag for them. I buy the water bottle they should be using. So, right, there's zero deviation on the meal plan I give them. Yeah, so a 10 is that. Yeah, and that's the only way people are going to get there, is having an accountability partner, right? So, like, I didn't learn that until, like, you know, in my late 30s or 40s, of like having someone accountable to you is so powerful. Yes, in high school 20s, 30s, I was disciplined enough and I would call myself out. But right, like you said, a lot of people aren't that freakish. So for those non-freakish people, you know, yes, you could find the plan online, you could find anything online, but for that average person, if they want, you need that accountability partner to get you to that level. Because if not, you know, it's like New Year's Day. All right, you'll go a week. All right, I'm going to go a week. And then by February, people are, you know, back to normal. Same thing with any sort of performance, right? It's like, if you want to run a quicker mile, you need a coach to check in on you, to check your times, to have you accountable. If not, people are just going to wither away.
So the 10 is you're there, like you're living with them. That's the extreme example. What I would imagine for a lot of people working with a coach, they do the once, twice a week check-in sessions online or something. What is that, like a 5?
Yeah, I mean, look, the way I work is I have weekly calls with my people, and then I have midweek check-ins. And those midweek check-ins are just a quick text of like, how's it going? Right? And I leave it open to them. Sometimes depending on who it is, they're like, oh man, you know, I had a bacon cheeseburger and a chocolate mousse cake last night. I messed up. Or some people, it's like, yo man, 0 deviation. I'm on track. I can't wait to check in on Friday with you and see where we're at. Right? So it has this like, basically, look, a coach is there to support you, right? The coach isn't there to make you feel bad, because as we know, people only grow and change if you feel good. There's few people that are going to feel bad to change. The majority of people want a reasonable challenge, want to feel good in order to change. Ask them the right questions and then get them there. It's a simple equation, right? You turn the dials on where you want the dials to be turned. But again, the bottom line is like, I'm the support. I'm that person. I'm your biggest cheerleader, period. David Goggins to me doesn't look like he would be a cheerleader. Like, I feel like that dude will like run me to the ground and make me cry, which, you know, me personally, I would like that, but a lot of people don't.
Now, is having people track what they're eating and drinking part of your normal or not?
No, it's not about tracking. It's about, what's your goal? Here's a meal plan. We assess every week, every other week, depending on how it's affecting your physique or your performance, and we tweak it from there. There's no deviation, right? You're not telling me what you're eating. If you come in and you say, I want to do X, I want level 10, I'm going to tell you what to eat. And then there's 0 deviation, right? Yeah, if you deviate, your goals are just going to take a little bit longer.
One selfish question, one personal question, with the reason that cutting or physique has never been a goal of mine is because I've found that I have this issue that I can put on muscle very, very easily with weights, but it also makes me insatiably hungry. I will just so it's sort of, for me, weights and stuff, it's just
you're probably eating the wrong thing.
It's not worthwhile, and I don't really value having the muscle so much anyway. And then on the cutting side, in terms of getting especially lean, I find that after a certain point, the costs are so dire, it seems like, in terms of the way that you feel. And in particular, like, I would say my typical day is I'm working on something intellectual during the day, whatever my project is at the moment. And then I have a couple of hours, an hour maybe on not all days, but a good number of days at either the beginning or the end of the day where I can do some form of workout, be it tennis or running or gym. And so I have to have a balance of mental energy and physical energy. And I notice my mind doesn't do well when I'm running on calorie deficits. And also for any sort of extended calorie deficit, like recently when I tried to cut this 10 pounds and did 35,000 calorie deficit, my energy for physical stuff and mental stuff is much diminished. Like after halfway there and beyond, it's just like a tennis. I remember I played tennis the last day when I just got to reaching this goal, and it was awful. Like just no energy whatsoever. So for me, the costs of being in that deficit state are pretty severe. Do you think that's generally true, or do you think I just don't navigate it well with what I'm eating?
Look, right, I think scientifically that's proven, right? There's like brain foods, right? There's certain brains that are supposed to help your performance, right? So my first question would be like, are you eating enough of those brain foods?
I would say yes, and for me, it's so consistent. It's so consistent across times when I've cut weight in my life and the feeling is so similar. It's like a deep hunger, and I think it just relates to the calorie deficit itself. So I wish you had kept a video blog, just like a 3-minute video every day during your 6 months. I found it entertaining. In the poker world, there's a really popular guy named All American Dave, who's an ex-military guy, and now he plays poker, and he also sells healthy foods to the poker community, especially during the summer poker tournaments. He has a food truck, and he does bodybuilding competitions. I don't know if he still does them, but he used to do them. And 3 or 4 years ago, he was keeping a video blog, and it was fascinating to watch the blog when he was deep in his cutting phase, because he had obviously done it like 50 times before, been in this cutting phase. And he basically every day in the cutting phase, he said, well, this feels the same as the last 50 times I did it. It sucks. I feel irritable. I have no energy. My brain doesn't work. I just feel terrible. And it makes me think that like, of course, each time on the 40th time, if he felt that way, the 41st time he tried to make corrections, he's always trying to make corrections, and it always feels terrible just because of the deficit itself.
Yeah, look, I think the brain thing is a completely different category where it's like, again, I think that you need like the proper rest, the proper hydration, the proper foods in order for you to like mentally be your sharpest, right? On the physical, yeah, look, it's going to be different if again, I think there's a lot of, at least for me, assumptions that were debunked, right? Like when I got the leanest and the most ripped and the lightest I've been, I was eating 7 meals a day. So yeah, my goal was to get lean, but it was almost counterintuitive that my last meal was like red meat and vegetables every single night. Because you would think, well, like, I'm trying to lose weight, I shouldn't eat, and my last meal should have been at 7 p.m. because it's da-da-da. That's just, that didn't work for me. That was the complete opposite. I was eating, losing weight, and shredding at 42. right? And so for me, like my performance, again, when I was like, and then I would do a lot of what they call like carb cycling, right? It's like a couple days, no carbs, the next day heavy on the carb. And yeah, maybe on those days when like the second day of no carbs, I was feeling lethargic. But for me, when I would go perform, either running or in the gym, man, I was so dialed in that, by the after the warm up or the first set, man, I am all in. And again, I'm chasing that feeling of how, like, so again, that my feeling is greater than anything, greater than like physically feeling tired, right? So an equation I use with a lot of my people is like, that again, that feeling you're chasing has to be greater than anything on the other side of the equation, right? A lot of people were like, well, I have a full-time job in New York City. I have 2 kids. I have to commute to work. So that means I have to wake up, 5 a.m. to chase that feeling, chase that workout. And I'm like, all right, is that feeling, is that workout greater than you feeling that discomfort of waking up at 5 a.m.? If it is, then all right, then it's not for you. But again, something has to give. So I keep telling people is fill in this equation. If you chasing that feeling, you chasing that performance is greater than, it has to be greater than whatever is on the other side. And right, so you'll make all the adjustments, make it non-negotiable, commit, whatever words you want to use to make that side greater than. Yeah, that was just part of the course. Like, yeah, I would feel hungry. I would eat, I would start working out, warm up. And once I get those endorphins going, which again is my feeling, those feelings are like rocket fuel. And I'm off. I'm 60 minutes in the gym, 60 minutes outside pushing my body. You're not getting in my way.
Well, were there any supplements you like to use other than just good nutrition? Were you doing creatine
I was pretty consistent with like post-workout protein shakes. That's about it, right? Which, I'm like, I try to keep everything sort of like natural, but I feel like to have a post-workout protein shake was easy to carry around, and your muscles need that fuel post-workout, right? A lot of times you could even bring your meals and just have a meal, but so it was just protein shake after workouts.
What's the logic of the carb cycling?
Look, the logic is if you're trying to get cut, at some point your muscles, your body needs carbs. So you can't go a week of 0 carbs. Like your muscles need carbs to grow, right? And then also for your brain, you're like insulin. So like you need that like glycogen. You can't run that at a deficit and keep it there. You won't be able to function. Right, so the carb cycle is like, all right, I'm going to shock and that I'll talk about this as well, right? You'll go 1 or 2 days of no carbs, but then you need that carb, that glycogen to feed your muscles and have your muscles perform. That's the other thing I want to talk about. Like in our 40s, the other thing I learned, on the physical side is one must keep shocking their body. Think about it. We've been working out since our high school days. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that are doing the same workout routine for the last 10 years, 5 years, right? In terms of same exercise, same reps, same routine, same order. In our 40s, man, I was switching it up almost every other week, or even maybe almost every other week, right? To keep shocking my body, keeping those muscles guessing. And same thing with the foods. Your body will plateau at some point, right? Your muscles plateau. The way your body burns fat plateaus. So you have to keep shocking your system on the nutrition and on the workouts. So that's another key thing that I learned going through this process in my early 40s is you got to shock your system.
And it sounds like you're against the fads of fasting and that sort of thing. I've never been a fan of those ideas. Yeah.
It didn't work for me. Again, the thing that is still mind blowing was like having steak and vegetables for almost 6 months and I would wake up with like my stomach flat and ripped. Right. So I'm against that. Plus, to your point, man, I'm always hungry. Right. So this meal plan I was on, I was eating, around 7 meals a day. It was perfect because I was eating almost every 2-3 hours. And trust me, like I was looking forward to that meal.
Among my group, there probably would be some people who would want to chat with you. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, just go to my website. Go to www.themontaukmethod.com. So it's themontaukmethod.com. Insta is at the Nelson Pena. So that's Nelson Pena, P like Peter, ENA, at the Nelson Pena.
So a couple more questions to end on. When there's a lot of talk in like the popular literature about a set point theory, or the idea that your body at certain ages has desired levels of fat based on your genetics and your personal history. To people who ascribe to this view, they think that, for instance, if you did have a period where you were overweight in 20s or something, your body will naturally want to have higher levels of fat. So you'll find it more challenging to get to very low levels of fat. You can do it, but your body always sort of wants to get back to a certain level. Did you personally find that after you finished this 6 months that your body desired to get back to higher body fat and pushed you to eat more?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I mean, look, I think this health fitness, it's a lifestyle, right? So I say the 6 months because that was just sort of a time frame that I went zero deviation, right? I went for, another year and a half of this lifestyle, right? So my point is, like, it's a lifestyle, right? If you want to be healthy mentally, physically, it's not about 6 months, it's a lifestyle, right? Obviously there's like different levels of intensity and different goals within that lifestyle, but it's a healthy lifestyle. So that's number one. And yeah, look, it's funny, I was a fat kid, period. Go on my Instagram. I was like, I think 8th grade, I was a fat kid. Probably 9th grade, I was a fat kid. I was pretty quick and my eye-hand coordination was great. And, I was funny. So like, I was like the funny athletic kid, let's say. And even then I started losing weight, probably like sophomore, junior year of high school, because obviously girls and all that. And so that was fun. But I do agree with you where there's like a default that your body goes back to. That being said, I'm not a fat guy. So like, yeah, I was a fat kid until I was like 15 years old. But I don't necessarily believe I'm going to go back to being that fat body because of this healthy lifestyle, right? I've educated myself. I have enough momentum. It makes me look, again, I go back to like, I look great. I feel great. I'm the best version of myself. Right. So, but yeah, I do agree that, there's a default, but I think, with so many years of living, people could change their habits and behaviors to avoid that.
So last question, with any sort of workout goal or any sort of fitness goal, you have the nutrition side, then you have the fitness side, and there are really two parts to it. You need to keep with the general plan. Like for you, if it's working out every morning at 6 o'clock, you have to actually get up at 6 o'clock and do that. That's very hard.
But it's hard because those people haven't identified the feeling that they're chasing and that feeling that they want, right? So, right, they call it could be the endorphins, it could be the runner's high. Whatever, to me, like you label that feeling. So it doesn't have to be necessarily working out. It could be a woman doing yoga. It could be someone doing dancing, right? That has a feeling. So that's why I work with all my people is like, let's identify that feeling that you want. So when the alarm goes off at 5:50 in the morning, you're not thinking like, oh man, this sucks. You're thinking, oh man, I can't wait to chase that feeling. But people need to be clear on like what that feeling is. And then you go back to like, is that feeling greater than, oh my God, that 6 a.m. alarm bell, right? So that's going to trump all of it.
And within workout, so I would say the next big thing is within workout intensity, which a lot of people struggle with, myself included. Like then you actually get there and now it's like, do the thing. So an example would be, let's say you set a hard fitness goal for yourself. You use the example of the 10K under 18 minutes, which would be, everyone can agree, a very, very difficult goal. You have to get to the track and then you have to, with no one watching, just doing your thing, like run the fastest 3 mile that you can as training. And it's tough, right? Like what are your strategies when you're in that position, when you show up and like you've made it to the tennis lesson and now you know you have to give it 100% intensity, work on your footwork, like just go all out. You get to the track, you want to run your fastest 3 mile. It's just you out there. Like you got to run your fastest. Like what are your strategies in that moment?
Yeah, look, right. It's like, if you're the track alone, that's why it's always good to have an accountability partner. Either have a coach, have someone that you're like checking in, be like, today I ran this long, this was my time, right? And but look, you're gonna have good days and bad days, right? But again, it comes down to consistency compounds, right? You're gonna have bad days and it's okay, right? It's okay. But again, it's that consistency compounding that is gonna make the difference and is gonna get you closer to that goal, right? You can't be discouraged because we're human. At the end of the day, we're not robots, right? We're humans and it's okay. And it's okay that we're slowing down. It's okay that, you know, your body fat is a little bit higher. It's about consistency and having a healthy lifestyle.
I love it, man. Well, this has been fun. This is, it's been motivating and it's been a good time. It's good to catch up.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me and always a pleasure, Brandon.